This is TWiT.
It's no April Fool's joke. We've got one for you, and it actually happened. T-Mobile completed its long time coming merger with Sprint yesterday on April 1st. No indication whether that was purposeful or not. It's probably just a coincidence.
With John, I don't think it's a coincidence with John.
Still, who the heck knows? Yeah, I wouldn't put it past him. You're absolutely right. The new T-Mobile will be the name going forward, the new T-Mobile. So you'll know that it's new. And we have Joe Maring from Android Central to help walk us through the deal. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, you bet. It's good to see you, man. So this has been a while coming, at least a couple of years. The deal kicked off initially, or at least the starting of the deal kicked off in June 2018. Just kind of from a summary perspective, why did it take as long as it has? Why has it taken the last couple of years to complete?
So a merger of this scale is a huge deal with a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different people that need to approve things to happen. T-Mobile and Sprint, they needed to get approval from the Department of Justice, the FCC, and then they had a final vote from a federal judge back in February of this year. So, you could look at it as just, two companies are coming together to make one new one. But when we're dealing with two companies that people rely on to make phone calls and text messages, use their mobile data to stay connected while they're not near Wi-Fi. There are just a lot of things that government bodies and people of higher power need to make sure that this is an okay thing to happen, and it's not going to cause consequences down the road that we don't want to see.
Yeah. So we have Sprint. One time, I actually just saw an article earlier today on The Verge that was kind of like a grand farewell to Sprint, who at one time was kind of the T-Mobile of the networks, right? It was really doing things a lot differently than some of the other networks at the time. Ultimately, T-Mobile came along with John Legere and kind of, took that crown. But so Sprint was strong, and then it kind of weakened a little bit. And now here we are. Sprint is no more. Current Sprint subscribers, what can they look forward to now? Like, is there any immediate effect that they will notice in this transition, or is this more of a longer term transitional thing? What can they look forward to?
So right now, it's definitely going to be a long-term thing. It was a long-term thing getting to this stage, which is very important for what needs to happen. But for the immediate future, if you are a Sprint customer, basically nothing's going to change right now. You get the same plans that you have, the same price you're paying. You can still go to the Sprint website. If you need to buy a phone, you can still go to a Sprint retail store. Looking ahead, in the relatively distant future, T-Mobile and Sprint are touting that under the new T-Mobile branding, that the capacity for the network should be about 14 times stronger in the next 6 years if you're comparing that to where T-Mobile is on its own right now, which on its own is still better than what current Sprint customers have. And then also in the next coming years, they're touting 5G coverage for 99% of Americans, even in those rural areas, which is something that Sprint has kind of struggled with over the years. So looking ahead, again, in the next years down the road, it's basically going to be more coverage, better speeds, greater capacity. But right now, and as far as we can tell, without any real deadlines or timeframes set in stone, it's kind of business as usual until, they really say otherwise.
And Sprint customers, they aren't going to have to make any sort of changes or anything to the phones that they already have. Some people might have the suspicion that, hey, my phone's set up for Sprint, and carriers can have the habit or have had the habit of being very specific as far as like, nope, this is a phone for our specific carrier. But that's not going to enter into the equation here. They're going to make this as seamless as possible for the customers, right?
Yeah, they're saying too. Yeah, the phone you have now is still going to work. You're not going to have to buy a new phone. If you look through the FAQs and stuff on their website, they're essentially saying that right now, even though they're still under the new T-Mobile company, Sprint's network and towers and devices are basically operating as they do today, still as standalone Sprint, and your T-Mobile phone and network operates as a standalone T-Mobile. Over time, that's going to evolve into the new T-Mobile under the one network, so it's kind of unclear what happens then if we're going to need to make some sort of switch from CDMA on T-Mobile or on Sprint to GSM on T-Mobile. But right now, and until something changes, it's still Sprint devices are going to work fine. Your T-Mobile devices are going to work fine. And there's nothing that consumers need to worry about changing.
Cool.
Well, one thing that I think is going to be changing for consumers, and one thing that always made me like T-Mobile, was the big guy on campus, John. Have we ever learned how to pronounce his last name? Leger, Ledger.
Ledger, yeah.
Leger. Anyway, good old Johnny guy.
Johnny L.
Johnny L is not going to be the CEO of the new T-Mobile. Do we know anything about what he's going to do next? Is he just going to go, I don't know, become the next Richard Branson, or what's his whole deal now?
There were rumors and talk a few months ago that he was going to take the CEO position at WeWork, but then those kind of got debunked and sources said that that wasn't going to happen. It's kind of unclear right now what he's going to do. One would assume he still stays in the wireless space or the mobile space to some degree, or he could just do Slow Cooker Sunday full time, his little Twitter cooking show. It's kind of hard to tell. He hasn't really said too much about what he's going to do. Like I said, I would just kind of expect he takes a similar role just because he's been in this business for so many years. WeWork is off the table. He could take a CEO position at another company or do something a little less under the radar. So right now that's kind of unclear of what the future holds for Johnny L or Leger.
I mean, he's such a strong personality. I could see a lot of companies who want to kind of bring some fresh energy into the company. Turning to him would not be a bad choice. He's shown his ability to really take T-Mobile and kind of supercharge it with a lot of electricity, and it's just really works for the brand. Yeah, well, I was going to say, I wonder if he's going to continue wearing magenta T-shirts underneath his sports jacket. That remains to be seen. Who is Mike Sievert? Of course, he's the new CEO of T-Mobile. But what do we know about kind of his background and the energy that he can bring to the new T-Mobile?
So in the early days, before he was with T-Mobile, he was with AT&T in the early 2000s, from around 2002, 2005. John Ledger hired him personally in 2012 to serve as the chief marketing officer. Few years past 2015, he transitions to chief operating officer, and then 2018 he becomes the president for T-Mobile. So he's been around the company and the Un-carrier movement for a while now, and being in the other executive role has worked closely with John over the years. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see kind of an essence of that whole John Ledger stage presence kind of stick with T-Mobile for a little bit, just because this is someone that's worked closely with him, and he kind of has a little bit of that energy, if not as exorbitant as John Ledger has it. So I would think we can probably look forward to a similar feel, maybe not quite as loud and boastful, but maybe a slightly tuned down version of that from him.
Yeah, I'll expect at least a couple of F-bombs, and then he's right on the same playing field.
Definitely.
Don't let us down, Mike. Now, the press release talks of $40 billion of investment, I believe, over the next 3 years into the network, into the business. And now suddenly we're in a three-horse race. We've got Verizon, we've got AT&T, and we've got the new T-Mobile. So what do you think is kind of where does this lead to? Does this ultimately end up serving T-Mobile customers with the better network, with all that funding and the increased competition? Do we see prices going up around the industry as a result of this? What are people kind of concerned about? Because anytime the market gets smaller with fewer major players, and this has been a big concern around the mobile industry kind of consolidating the way it has been, you eliminate choice, and you increase the odds that things are going to just pay more because there's less competition to drive those prices down. Is that the concern here? Do we see kind of this being the path that's laid in front as a result of this merger?
I mean, there's definitely chatter and people worried about prices going up, just because, like you said, if competition ever goes down, it's generally never a good thing, because if there's one less person in the ring you need to worry about, you don't need to be as fierce or as on your foot as you do if you have multiple people coming for your customers, your competition. T-Mobile and Sprint have both said that prices are not going up for the immediate future. They're touting that you're going to get the same benefits and prices you have now, more benefits down the road at the same rate or potentially even lower rates. But I don't think it's silly or unwarranted to be worried about how that changes in the next few years down the road. The coming months and for the rest of the year and probably the year after that, I wouldn't expect prices to go up, and they've both been fairly adamant about that not happening. But it's, again, hard to tell what kind of world the wireless space in the U.S. is going to be once we've had a new T-Mobile working for 3, 4, 5 years, however long it may be. So it wouldn't be to rule out prices at some point down the road. I think it would be pretty easy to see that happening. But for the immediate future, and that's kind of the theme with this whole thing, is that, nothing is changing. The positive end of these two companies coming together, less competition, again, generally not an ideal thing, but living in the world we do now where 5G is kind of a thing. Some companies are trying to roll it out and it is available in certain markets, but the availability and the performance has still shown obvious growing pains. The number that they're throwing around between Sprint and T-Mobile being able to cover 99% of Americans with that 5G coverage. And they're really making it a point to say that this is also going to include people in rural America, which is a market that Sprint is kind of notoriously not been great for. And even T-Mobile to some degree. That's sort of been the area where Verizon reigns supreme, where it has that coverage. Even if you go out in the boonies to the middle of nowhere, you still have service. And they've been touting that when they come together for this 5G service, it can apply to your wireless for your phone, and also they can use 5G for home internet, which is someone that grew up in a town with less than 1,000 people, and my parents are still there with Frontier internet with DSL speeds. That's kind of exciting to hear, and to know that we're going to be in a position in the next few years where we can have reliable wireless and potentially home internet service in these generally underserved markets. Is it going to be worth losing one more horse in the race and being down to 3 major carriers as opposed to 4? Remains to be seen. But there are also obvious benefits of kind of the 2 underdog or the 2 mid-range players joining together to kind of form a truer top 3, if you want to think about it like that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The timing with 5G, because it still is early. We keep talking about how, the carriers really want to make a big deal about 5G right now. They're setting the path for that. But for users, for subscribers, it's really not as much of a sellable product at this point compared to maybe it'll be in a couple of years. And this is timing perfectly with that major investment as the result of this merger. So who knows? The new T-Mobile could come out ahead in that regard. As with most everything we talk about on these shows, it remains to be seen, and we'll be following it closely.